Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you may be, somewhere across our lovely world. Thanks so much for joining us live here today for Serverless Office Hours, streaming on the AWS Twitch channel, YouTube Serverless LAN channel, and also via LinkedIn Live. I'm Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate for Serverless at AWS, and I'm super excited to join literally the founder of serverless.com himself. How's that for a cool to get there at the beginning, Austen Collins. Austen, how are you?
I'm great, Julian, and super excited to be chatting with you.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, Austen and I've met. It's been a while at reInvent, but Austen, you've obviously, Serverless Inc., you obviously saw Serverless right at the beginning. You have serverless.com as the domain name, so it shows you how early you were there. What was your path to doing what you do today, and when the light bulb went off for Serverless?
Oh yeah, well, I'm pretty simple. My goal is to build more and manage less in life. I love creating things, and at the end of the day, it's so hard to build stuff that people love, like that people actually like in the world. Is the hardest thing. So the idea of getting distracted from that, insurpassable challenge is agonizing to me. So I like to focus as much as I can on like building great things. And that kind of led me on the journey to building this company. Led me to cloud, AWS early days, Heroku early days. And then when I saw what AWS was doing with AWS Lambda, when it just came out, at the time, there wasn't a serverless category. There wasn't a serverless buzzword or anything. I think it was event-driven code or glue code. Those were like the marketing categories, I think, for Lambda when it came out. And when I saw that, I thought, auto scaling, never pay per idle. This looks like not just another compute service, but like the foundation of a new type of architecture in the cloud that would have radically low overhead. So, which speaks to me, right? Just focus as much as possible. Don't get distracted from building great things. And Lambda enabled that. But the developer experience in the early days was, it was left a lot to be desired, right?
Rough.
So. Super rough. And so I tried playing with it with the kind of the tooling that was available at the time. And it was just, it was kind of agonizing. So I started working on a developer tool to make it easy to build entire architectures on Lambda. So all types of stuff, data processing pipelines, scheduled tasks, and APIs especially. And that little hacky project of mine turned into what is now known as the Serverless Framework. And that was 2015. Feels like ages ago. Definitely was ages in tech years, right?
Yep.
And that project has it struck a chord with developers, and continues to grow massively up to this day. I think it just, every developer, most of them seems like they want the same thing as I was kind of seeking early on, which is we just want to build more and manage less stuff. So that's our origin story. And
Cool.
one of the note on the name, we didn't. It was so early. Again, serverless wasn't a category or anything yet, and we launched the framework under another title called JAWS.
Yeah.
And it was JAWS. The tagline was the monstrously scalable application framework. Had a cool shark logo, all that stuff in the GitHub README, and it got in a little bit of copyright trouble for that one in 2015. Should have seen that coming in retrospect, but that was a problem, and we had to change the name really fast. And I had seen serverless one time from an old blog post by Tim Wagner, who used to lead Lambda in the early days. And he wrote, you could use Lambda to build serverless applications. And that's how I ended up putting it in the JAWS repo, as like that secondary tagline. But every time I talked to developers and I would say that word, while it's not the most technically accurate word, around, the developers love it. And they would start nodding. And what's just something about that word is kind of like this metaphor for what every developer wants at the end of the day. And so we took on that word early on. It was strange. People thought it was a silly word. They didn't get it. We were trying to raise capital then. The investors were like, we don't understand this whole serverless word. We don't get it. And so it's so weird to go through that experience of like, this is really dumb. Don't change the name from JAWS. It has traction. It's working. Why would you change the name to serverless, right? It was actually a scary moment. The domain was available. A lot of things were available at the time, and we didn't know that the project would be so big and there would be such a massive category coming. So we're Serverless Inc. We make the serverless framework. We have serverless.com, and we are awkwardly named the same thing as the category. It's like we're a car company called Car, right?
Yeah.
And so it's been a fun journey, overall with that, and just looking to where we are today. It's serverless is bigger than ever, and it's fantastic. I still love it. We've got a great team. Everybody loves it, and I think the mix of like AI and serverless these days is just this golden age of software development, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're sort of still quite at the beginning of all the possibilities that are going to unfold. And so even the people who are saying, serverless has had its time, we're on to other new kind of things. I'm very much of the opinion that serverless is going to underpin, but a lot of what we're going to do in the future. And I was at a conference last week, and I was walking around. There were a lot of, with Gen AI is obviously the new hotness. And I was looking around at all the samples. And it wasn't just AWS there as well, but all of the Gen AI application architectures they were showing on various slides and booths and that kind of thing all had a serverless underpinning of how they were called or how they were orchestrated or how they were put together. So it's like, yeah, sure, this is just the way, the best way to build applications.
It's the most rational argument at the end of the day. And there's people, there's some memes going around about serverless pricing, and serverless is complicated. And certainly we hear those. There's lots of room for improvement around pricing, around complexity of serverless architecture, serverless infrastructure. We think about that stuff every day at our company. But the direction, the mission, the goal of the whole category is the best argument out there, right? And in this incredibly hyper competitive world where more people are coming online, there's more developers than ever, everybody's armed with AI. You need everything to help you on your journey to build great things, and make an impact out there. So I just don't see serverless going anywhere. It just feels very much inevitable. As this is what the cloud was always meant to be, let's just go for it. Let's go further in that direction. Figure out how we can make better abstractions, APIs for everything, solutions out of the box. We already have the best building blocks ever. And 5 years from now, it'll get even better.
I agree. Well, we're going to be coming back to a lot more from Austen a little later on, but just quickly to talk about some of the things over the past week of serverless. We didn't have a stream last week. I don't remember missing a stream for many years, other than over the holiday season, but there were floods in Poland and our guest couldn't come. So we had to, I'm glad he's all safe, just to let you know, no issues. So that was really cool. But yeah, it was all about SmartBear's Swagger Hub, Austen just talking about APIs for everything. So yeah, really cool way that you can document your APIs with SmartBear Swagger Hub. That was 2 weeks ago. In terms of what to do, yeah, even though reInvent is coming around, I'll touch on that shortly. Yeah, still lots of things coming out. So Lambda now supports tagging of the event source mappings and the code signing config resources. You want to tag everything as possible in your AWS account for cost controls or just understanding what's going on. So Lambda adds more tagging support. Amplify, you're building front-end applications. You can now use long-running tasks with async Lambda functions. So if you're using GraphQL, what's really cool is the GraphQL doesn't have to hold up while it's waiting for something, can do something asynchronously, and then buy GraphQL subscriptions, then update the front end when you're ready. Super. I've been talking a lot about interesting application primitives that you could build where it looks as though it's synchronous from the front end, but is actually all asynchronous in the back end. And with EventBridge's recent latency reductions, this makes it all sort of possible. So yeah, lots of things coming out. AWS Compute blog post, nothing sort of major, but yeah, if you are doing some batched data using parallelization in Lambda, then Anton has a post for you as well. We've only got one summit left, I think, unless a new one's been added and I haven't been paying attention. So if you're in Ottawa, the Public Sector Summit is on the 9th of October. Free technical events, really well put together, so I would suggest you go and have a look at that. Of course, I alluded to it, the big show at the end of the year, reInvent. This is where announcements happen, where connections are made, where breakout sessions are held, workshops, chalk talks. I've got 3 sessions I'm presenting as well, so it's going to be busy for me, but we'd love to see you there. This really is where a lot of focus goes from AWS at the end of the year, and just being part of the community, connecting with other people is the sort of most valuable part. So over the past week. But yeah, Austen, serverless framework, isn't just an early thing, as you've given its history, but we're now up to V4. What does V4 mean for the serverless framework?
A whole bunch of things. Maybe I'll go ahead and do a screen share now.
So yeah, certainly. And in fact, don't forget, we are live here, so please send us your questions and comments. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We have Ekshunyam, best domain to hold. That was when we were talking about the serverless framework. And then, yeah, also I said, who cares? Money is an illusion. Hand it over to the cloud providers. That was the comment when we were talking about cost and everything. But I assure you, we'll do everything we can to try and make your investments in serverless as cost effective or value for you as possible. Yeah, please send us your questions and comments. We always love to hear where you're from and what you're building and what you think about serverless. So yeah, Austen, we have your screen up.
So I think that comment's pretty funny, because if I look back to the early days of serverless, what really struck a chord, with developers especially, is how cheap it is at the end of the day, right? If if you're just getting something started, you don't have high volume workloads. It is just the most economic solution around, and I'll show that off right now. This is the Serverless Framework. Serverless Framework is a developer tool. It's a CLI, and it's YAML based, so you don't have to deal with any other configuration files, programming languages, code that someone wrote. It is just simple YAML and a CLI. And what it does is it deploys both AWS infrastructure onto the cloud as well as your code. So it's a bit different from like a web application framework like Express.js, in that it's actually kind of infrastructure as code, deploys the infrastructure as well as your code. And it uses AWS CloudFormation behind the scenes to make that reliable and easy. But why people love the serverless framework is we give people a very simple way to think about their serverless architectures with the least amount of YAML. And that is, you basically have a functions configuration block where you could list your functions that contain your logic, and then the events that trigger them. And the events could be all types of stuff, could be a scheduled task, could be SQS, could be SNS, could be events coming from EventBridge, from Kinesis. And you could use this to build all types of use cases. And then even HTTP requests are modeled out in our world as events. And so with this little bit of syntax here, and I'll run this in the background, this is going to go ahead, compile out to a broader CloudFormation template. It's going to create an AWS Lambda function, and it's going to look at this and say, oh, this Lambda function needs to be triggered by an HTTP API event. HTTP API is a API gateway product from Amazon Web Services. So the serverless framework will go provision one of those API gateway products, and as well as the HTTP path and the method on that API gateway, and integrate that with a Lambda function. There's some room here for environment variables as well. Naturally, this configuration expands a lot. There's a lot you could do here. Looks like I have already deployed it. So let me just pull up the endpoint here. And it's going to provision that as well as some simple code. So this is basic, traditional JavaScript. And all this is doing is taking in the event and returning some basic JSON. And here's what you get out after a deployment: a single endpoint. And I'm going to hit it, and you'll see that JSON payload that was in the code. As easy as that. Very little YAML lines, very little code. And here's the thing: tying it back to that comment, I remember 2015. I would show this off and deploy everything, and I'd be doing this at talks live, with a big audience, and then I'd reload the URL here. I'm hitting it a whole bunch of times, and I'd ask the room. I'd say, like, how much do you think this costs to be up right now? And people go, oh, it's like $20 a month, or $9 a month or something. And I said, no, there's no monthly cost here. This is only charging a fraction of a cent whenever I interact with the API. And it was at that moment, I think the developers they just loved it. It was the ease of the tool and the cost savings at the end of the day. The fact that you could deploy logic, infinite amounts of logic, and it's not going to cost you anything until a user interacts with it. still to this day is amazing. So the notion of like, this is so expensive, definitely now when you are at scale and you have a bunch of high volume traffic that's very consistent, that's hitting Lambda, that's a great time to optimize. There's lots of ways you could optimize when you've solved the problem of product market fit and you built something that's worth optimizing for. But right now, this is as cheap as it gets in cloud. And the fact that you could have all this, in a few seconds with a deploy, people would clap. And it can be hard to get a developer audience to clap sometimes, but they would. And so it's interesting to hear the serverless pricing because it's like, no, that's this possibility, this capability is still unbeaten to this day. This is as cheap as it gets, right? So so anyway, that was kind of the history, and that's the this is the basic serverless framework experience here. And I think this notion of functions and events here, this simple way of thinking, I think had a lot to do with proving out the notion of a serverless architecture. And that was the thing that kind of gave birth to a bigger movement here. And I know Amazon was really excited when we were showing this off and seeing the traction it was getting. And this just really helped people get their head around like, okay, there's a new type of architecture in the cloud. It's radically efficient. And here's an interesting way to think about it. It's very simple. And I think this, serverless framework, Amazon with the great innovation in Lambda, and of course so many other serverless services, and then this simple way of thinking about things, functions and events, really planted the seeds of a broader movement.
Yeah, no, I think that's entirely valid. And yeah, even the cost thing, I think you need to be a pretty high scale anyway to optimize on that. Now, I think I did some, back of the napkin maths one day, and I think it was if you had a website that was running, just say during work hours during the week, so say 8 hours a day for 20 days a month, kind of thing. The Lambda free tier is 1 million free invocations every single month in perpetuity, and so that means you could run in a single account, I think 100 invokes every single second. 8 hours a day, 20 days a week, and it wouldn't cost you anything. And 100 hits on per second for a website, that's not huge, but I promise you there are many, many, many microservices out there, which may get 3 or 30 every kind of second. So get going super cheap, and then of course if it scales up, and it needs to scale up actually to ridiculously levels, which is a good thing. It means your business is busy. Yep, then you can optimize in plenty of options, as you said.
It's the best deal in cloud, still to this day, right? I mean, there's just there's just no argument I've seen in this entire time that makes more sense than this. Yeah, later optimize, of course, but right now deploy as much logic as you want. Don't incur any costs until people interact with it. And there's so much you could do. When this got started, we started to suddenly see people cram everything into AWS Lambda. Because everybody wanted this cost model, everybody wanted the auto scaling, and so it was okay. It's more than just like API endpoints. It's it's all type of event-driven kind of workers. Again, more scheduled tasks, all types of stuff, and so it's really anyway. To this day, if I gripe about this a lot, but if you hear people trying to over-optimize in the beginning when you're trying to find product market fit and build something that people actually give a damn about in the world. Don't get distracted. Don't over-optimize. It's so easy to over-engineer everything. This is still the best deal around. And, definitely when there's something better than this, I can't wait to support it in serverless frameworks. But
cool.
this is how we got started. Maybe I'll jump into V4 now.
Yeah, certainly.
So serverless framework V4, again, we've been around since 2015. This project has grown immensely. Frankly, I think we stumbled into a massive category without really realizing it, right? And as a result of that is the framework has grown immensely. And so with V4, we've really changed a lot of things and really changed the model a bit. And we've been innovating like crazy. There's a couple things that have really helped us along the way, some core architectural changes and whatnot. And if you go onto the V4, the serverless README here, you'll see we keep a list of all the new stuff that we're shipping in V4. Now, one big change for our community in V4 is that there is a commercial license on it. And it was a tough call to do that. It was tough for our longstanding community. But the way the commercial license works is you could use the framework for free, just like you always have been able to, as long as you're not working, for a company that makes over $2 million a year. So that's like the one commercial threshold there. And then there is a pricing model for it. And this was a tough transition for us because, we've been open source for so long and doing this, on our own for so long. But at the end of the day, we just couldn't scale to keep up with the project. With Serverless Framework version 3, it was a great version for us, but we were shipping, I think, like once every 2 months, every 3 months. And it just, again, this is a huge project. Infrastructure as code frameworks are massive. You burn a lot of calories in order to maintain them. You have to abstract and cover so many services and configuration patterns and every which way people can use that stuff together. And so we adopted this model, and frankly, it's been fantastic. It's been a renaissance at our company. We are shipping, we've gone from shipping every 2 months or 3 months to now, I think we ship like once or twice a week. And the team, we're trying to get a killer feature out the door every week. It's looking more like every 2 weeks right now. But each one of these has been like on like a 2-week cadence, like got to get this out. And our whole company has just been reoriented since V4 came out around the framework, around the CLI. Like this is our focus. We're here for the long term, and we're going to build the best darn serverless application framework around. And we have so many things we want to do. I think the priorities are, for us, right now, this is a lot of things we've needed to do forever. Like just stuff we haven't been able to do forever. We've been trying to maintain, the previous versions of the framework. And it's been, so much work that we haven't been able to, do the actual great innovation that we've been wanting to forever. So there's a bunch of stuff here that has just been like on the backlog that we've gotten out. And then up next for us is flexibility. So, the serverless cost concerns, we do hear them at high volume. And we think there's some pretty simple solutions for this, just to give people the different options once they get to scale. We want to be the cheapest, the best option for like going to market and getting something out the door as fast as possible without getting distracted. And then we also want to be the best option for once you have reached massive scale, making it easy to shift workloads around. So that's going to be up next for V4, and then also a bunch of AI stuff we're doing.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So just on your list, what is your favorite bit of V4 that you thought? It doesn't have to be the biggest or the flashiest, but the one that you thought, oh, this is the one you've always wanted to stick in, and happy that it's out.
Oh, there's a ton. So let's jump into this. First killer thing by far is dev mode. So one of the historic challenges with serverless architectures is they can be hard to develop on because you're working on cloud infrastructure that only exists in the cloud. And so you're stuck in this dilemma of, well, I want to work fast and I want to make changes quickly. Should I emulate the entire cloud locally on my machine? Or should I deploy every change, to AWS? So if you're a developer and you're deploying every change to AWS and it's taking, even over 5 seconds to deploy that change, kills your vibe, kills the flow, right? And you don't want anything to mess with that flow state while you're working. And then if you start trying to emulate everything locally, which we've got great support for, whether deploying fast in the cloud or emulating things locally, we have great support for both of these scenarios in Serverless Framework. We've got the Serverless offline plugin, super, super popular. But the challenge we've seen is it's easy to emulate stuff locally when your project's really simple and you're like one person working on it or a couple people working on it. But as soon as you add project complexity, you add team members to it, it is this massive tax that you have to maintain. And it just grows. And if you're expecting everyone to maintain a local emulation of AWS, it's an onerous tax. And all the productivity savings that you get from adopting serverless seem like they just go into maintaining a local emulation of AWS at the end of the day. So what's the solution? A hybrid approach. This is something, we've experimented. We've launched like 5 versions of this over the last, several years. But this is what we call dev mode. And so I'm going to, by the way, I'm using If you want to install Serverless Framework, you just use npm install serverless, and then with the global flag. I'm using a dev version that hasn't been released. Actually, I think this version has been released an hour ago. I don't want to use it on a live stream, but that's why I'm using the sfdev prompt here. So this is dev mode. So what this is going to do is it's going to do a hybrid approach to these different scenarios between local emulation and live cloud. So when I run this dev command, it's going to take my live serverless architecture that I just deployed, and it's going to tell the Lambda function to forward all the events from the live cloud architecture to my local machine here. And it's going to run those events against my local code, my local handler. And when my code is done, it's going to forward the response back up to my live Lambda function, and the Lambda function is going to return that response. And so what's the benefit of this? Well, first off, you don't have to deploy every change, right? So that saves you a bunch of time, and you can make changes here really quickly. So let me go ahead and load this endpoint again. So this is actually this is returned off my machine here. And I'll prove it with just a quick save. And there you go. So I just made a quick code change. I didn't have to deploy anything. I didn't have to emulate all of AWS on my machine. I just ran serverless dev. And you can see here, we actually log out the events and kind of some of the key information about the events that are hitting the Lambda function. So you can see, oh, the event come from API gateway. It was a GET request on this path. So you kind of get this smart event detection that tells you what events are coming into the code, which function handled it. And yeah, the beauty is just developer speed, productivity. It can make changes, don't have to deploy every change. I can do log statements, for example, and I'll refresh, and you can see the logs show up here as well. So instant speed of change, no deployments, no slowness. Errors also show up really quickly. So I'll just do undefined variable. There we go. You can see the errors show up here. The stack trace is here, and of course the API is broken now. This just allows you to work like we used to work, frankly, before serverless. Gives you that pace of development back. And it's super, super powerful. Only works for Node.js and TypeScript right now. But we have lots of plans for this, and we've got another kind of version of this coming out that's even better. So it solves a ton of problems with just pace of development with developers.
Yeah, that is super cool. How does it work behind the scenes? Is it maintaining a sort of a WebSocket connection within the Lambda function? I can see how that passes the event locally, but then how does the event then go back via a WebSocket connection? Is that the sort of magic sauce, because sort of people understand that?
Yeah, it is a WebSocket connection. I think it's using AWS IoT actually for this to really not deploy anything else into the account. Yeah, and now a couple caveats with this. Now this is not perfect yet. So what will happen here is if you do this in a live cloud architecture, it will hijack the code in those whatever Lambda functions you're working on, right? So if it's a shared dev environment, you'll have to look out if someone is running this against one of the Lambda functions in the dev environment. And that's, this is just a problem with cloud architecture in general. It's like the collision problem. How do we work on this cloud thing without, someone messing with something over here that affects someone working on this thing over here? And so typically companies will launch developers will have their own personal stage if they want to work on something. We see a lot of people doing domain-oriented architectures where they'll do a serverless.yaml for a specific domain. Like here's the this service is for handling users. And so then typically there'll be just a couple people working on a service at a time. And so that reduces collisions. And then, but if you want to get more granular, you could have developers create their own stages, their own environments in the cloud, and then they can work on this without colliding. But
and ultimately,
we have
because it's not paying, you're not paying individual money for this. Having each developer having their own stack isn't a waste of money, so to say, because it's just literally pricing on demand.
That's right. Yep, absolutely. We have another version of this coming out though. we'll kind of launch it hopefully in a month. It solves a lot of the collision issues, solves a bunch of stuff. I think it's really focused on the collaboration piece. So can't wait to show that off.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Because I know, one of the, some other attempts have tried this as well. But as soon as you have, two Lambda functions that run at the same time with multiple, with additional concurrency, it sort of breaks because the WebSocket connection, can't work between two execution environments locally, and it sort of breaks out. And then some things set the the reserved concurrency to 1 to resolve that, and it's all these little nuances with how Lambda works to make this work locally. But yeah, I love this. This looks great.
All right. Next up after that, so this has been fantastic. We want to roll it out to other languages shortly in Lambda. Up next, though, just native TypeScript support. So people have been asking about this forever in the framework. The framework was around long before TypeScript, and we haven't had a good TypeScript story other than Serverless Framework plugins. So if you don't know, Serverless Framework plugins can extend the framework any which way. So the whole framework architecture is really a plugin architecture. You can write a plugin to overwrite the core framework or to extend the core framework. And there's been a massive community of plugins that have been built up over the years. I think there's well over 1,000 now for doing all types of stuff with the serverless framework, making it easier to deploy front ends, for example, setting up logs up on CloudWatch, all types of things. And so we've relied on plugins to help with building and with TypeScript support. But now we built that in, so we've got native support. So as long as you have a handler with TS, we'll detect it, we'll build it for you, and deploy it, and you don't even really have to think about it. So let me go ahead and do a quick change here. So I'm switching over, I'm pointing the AWS Lambda function from the JavaScript handler to another handler written in TypeScript. And so this is just a bare bones TypeScript handler, console log. It's going to return this message, hopefully here.
Yeah, while that is actually deploying, just Dax from SST, thanks for joining us on the stream. So they also do some sort of a cool, live Lambda kind of thing. So thanks for joining us as well. And then Rugged Dan, very cool. Is this limited to Lambda at this point? If I can't remember the timing when this came through, if it was about this dev mode, then yes, it is. This is sort of limited to Lambda at this point, because this is the particular nuance of Lambda of having to deploy your code up into the cloud. If you're using some sort of container orchestration system or some kind of thing, you've got a different pipeline to get your code up into the cloud. I'm sure they, projects to maybe optimize that, but it's different things. Yes, short answer, I think this is Lambda only.
Yeah, for now, Lambda only. Again, we got another version coming out. Super pumped about it. Been working on it for like a year, and so that will, that will have more support for other things. So here we go. Didn't have to really think about building anything. This uses ESBuild behind the scenes, and so there's same defaults built in. There is a new build config block, so you can customize it. Lots of different configuration patterns. You can support plugins for ESBuild. But you also don't have to think about it by default, right? So this compiles out to JavaScript, and there you go. Native TypeScript support built in without anyone having to do anything else.
Cool.
All right, moving along here. Let's see. Okay, so for those who are coming from Docker and are familiar with Docker Compose, it's great because it solves a lot of problems larger applications, larger workloads have, of how do we deploy a lot of different things together. Docker Compose is super popular. I think it's like over 70% of all Docker developers are using Compose at this point. And we've always wanted to have something for serverless framework like that. So we do have a serverless Compose YAML that was launched in version 3. And this is great for monorepos, especially where you have subfolders for every different service, and you could simply in your serverless compose file list out a bunch of services. So say you have a domain-oriented architecture, you could have a service for users, you could have a service for your e-commerce backend, comments for your products or something like that, or reviews. Each one would be organized as a separate service, and Serverless Compose allows you to deploy all these things together with a single command. Furthermore, though, what we've launched in V4 recently is initial support for a couple other frameworks. So we've learned companies are using, especially large companies, are using a lot of things in their organization. So they're using Serverless Framework. They've got Terraform in there somewhere. They've probably got old CloudFormation templates around there somewhere. And they also have SAM, which is the AWS Serverless Application Model, very similar to Serverless Framework. And we thought, well, we've got so many great developer experience features. Why don't we just bring these to these other CloudFormation-based experiences, right? Our dev mode can work the same whether it's a Serverless Framework service or a CloudFormation template or a SAM template, for example. So we've finally brought in support for SAM as well as traditional CloudFormation templates. So here in Serverless Compose, you'll see we've got a CloudFormation template. And this is very bare bones. This just has a DynamoDB table. We'll see people typically deploy shared resources in CloudFormation or in Terraform. For example, if it's not serverless related, typically they're using Terraform or they're using CloudFormation. Yeah. And then for serverless architectures, they're using Serverless Framework, and they need to be able to better integrate with these things.
And shared resources also can, obviously DynamoDB is a shared, is a serverless database. But yeah, things like VPC connectivity or, Kafka clusters or what else? RDS databases, those kind of things where you've got, something that's a bit more static that you're going to set it up once and sort of leave it. A good practice is maybe have that in a separate stack. And now, if you are using, CloudFormation or Terraform, maybe you've got a separate platform team or something or DBA team who looks after those databases, or data analytics who looks after your Kafka deployments. This is a way you can do that and then have the best of the serverless part, which is going to be a more dynamic separate part.
Absolutely. And so super common. And then also SAM support. So initial support for SAM, here's a classic SAM template. It looks pretty similar to the Serverless Framework template. We also support the SAM config TOML file. Okay. So we do support some of the configuration options in here are specific to the SAM CLI. But ones that aren't specific to the SAM CLI, we've tried to bring on support for all of these. And so it's pretty robust. And I think the release that just went out this morning actually shows off what I'm going to show, introduces this functionality. So this is deploying a Serverless Compose file that has a CloudFormation template, a traditional Serverless Framework service, as well as a SAM template, all together in one, hopefully pretty streamlined deployment here. So you'll see it just deployed the CloudFormation template, which is called shared resources, and now it's deploying the traditional and the SAM templates. So by default, deploys everything in parallel, unless you are consuming some data from one of the other services. So if you're consuming an output from one service, it will create a graph, a deployment graph automatically. And so it'll deploy everything in the correct order for you. And there you go. So we've got our CloudFormation template was deployed, our SAM template was deployed, and our traditional Serverless Framework project was deployed. And the goal here is people want one tool at the end of the day. We see a lot of our users, they just want one tool to do everything with. And so we like providing some consolidation here, one tool to do it all. And then plus we've got so many developer experience features that we want to bring it to CloudFormation templates and SAM templates and stuff. So all our stuff, will work for these. We don't have dev mode for SAM or CloudFormation yet, but that's coming within a few weeks. There we go. There's our SAM endpoint. And if we look into this a little bit further, we've got a CloudFormation template that has a database. So there's that DynamoDB table. This is actually outputting the table name, which you're going to need in your code to interact with that database. And you'll see here that the traditional SAM template is inheriting the table name from the CloudFormation template. The traditional serverless framework template is inheriting the table name, and the SAM template's inheriting the table name. So classic example, let's deploy these common things in CloudFormation and inherit them in AWS Lambda logic. So this pattern can extend. You could pass data around pretty easily here.
So you don't need to do a depends online or something like that. It's just going to realize, figure out the graph itself and know that you're using something and work it out. Obviously, things would get heavy if you have circular dependencies, but then you got issues to work on.
We do our best to detect circular dependencies. So we're using a pretty good kind of graphing library that does that. And then we do have depends on just in case, because there's some occasions where you're going to want that. So we allow for that as well.
Yeah, so I suppose if you had something particularly in your code that would reference another service that's not within the configuration of that service, or an environment variable or something, then you would need to sort of a bit more manually configure that.
Yeah. Up next to in v4, we've got a new stages property. So people have configuration that differs across your stages, aka your environments. Very, very common. Here's the canonical example. You've got a domain, for development, and you've got your production domain, right? And so we've tried to figure out a way. The Serverless Framework has a notion of environments, what we call stages, built into it, which is pretty nice. A lot of people really appreciate that, because there's no notion of making it easy to manage environments, typically using Amazon Web Services. And so we have a lot of these great stage features built in. Now with the stages block, it's just so easy to specify stage-specific configuration as well as defaults. So here we've got a default stage. This works across all stages unless it's overridden, by the stage that you're targeting in your deployment. So the domain is kind of the classic example here. And these can all be the stages property can be used within your serverless framework kind of classic serverless.yaml file. So you could put stages in here, or you could do it at the compose level, which is really nice, because then you could define configuration that's stage specific or default across all stages that's inherited within all these services out of the box. So if I go into my serverless.yaml here, you'll see that I have the domain param that I'm passing in as an environment variable to AWS Lambda, and doing the same in the SAM template right around here. And so you could see there's that domain that was passed in. So just really easy to consolidate configuration and reason about it in larger applications.
And also encouraging developers to have separate stacks for dev and production. This is serverless. You're not paying extra for extra stacks. Go for it. Makes it much easier.
Definitely. We have so many users that have deployed too much, honestly.
That's the other. The Lambda sprawl can be real when
Lambda sprawl, thousands and thousands of Lambda functions, other serverless resources, CloudFormation, stacks. That's on the other end of the spectrum. So
I was chatting to someone recently who had an issue with their CI/CD pipeline didn't tear down the stack afterwards, and so they'd be running all these automated builds, which was awesome, based on a get PR number or get commit or something, and someone had literally commented out or deleted the delete stack part, and so they were like, "Oh my word!" They just had literally thousands and thousands, whatever stacks, and it was like, yeah.
That's awful. It's definitely a pet peeve of mine. You got to be, if you're using AWS, you have to be a good citizen and clean up your stuff, right? Or you will run into some account-wide limit and break the whole environment for everybody else. But people who leave stuff around in AWS, there's a couple of them on our team. I'm always on their case. I'm like, I know who did this. So one of the killer features of Serverless Framework, it's been around forever, is just this notion of Serverless Framework variables. And so a variable is defined in this in this syntax here has the $, the curly braces. And what this allows is it just references kind of dynamic data that could be pulled from a lot of places. Here we're pulling it in from the compose file, we're passing it in directly, but serverless framework variables have a ton of data sources. Let's pull up here. So you could pull, makes it easy to pull in CLI options, external YAML files. You can reference other YAML files. You can reference a JavaScript file. You can have some arbitrary code run to fetch data. You can reference Git values in there. I'm sorry, AWS folder isn't loading. But you could reference a bunch of stuff on SSM. Just all, you could reference values in an S3 bucket, for example, on DynamoDB. It's amazing for not having to write any code, and not having to incur any additional complexity, and just being able to pull data into your serverless framework projects. So one of the cool things about the SAM support and the CloudFormation support is we actually support serverless framework variables in these templates already. So this stuff will be loaded before anything gets deployed, which is great because you could kind of, just reference dynamic data one way without, and load it anywhere across these different frameworks out of the box. And then we also have in V4, so it's super common. Everybody has Terraform in a large organization. So Terraform is fantastic. And it's widely adopted for a bunch of stuff outside of serverless. I think we actually got started right around the same time Terraform got started. Maybe Terraform had like a 1 or 2 year head start. And it was interesting because the developers never wanted to use Terraform. They always wanted to use serverless framework when doing serverless stuff. And today we see that still be true. So developers have serverless framework. They don't want to use Terraform, but they need to get stuff out of Terraform. So we have a new, in the stages property, we've got a new notion called resolvers, which we're building on here. And a resolver basically helps you define some config to fetch data from a place, where some configuration is going to be needed at the end of the day. And this solves the classic problem of how do I get Terraform state outputs, some shared resources, for example, into my AWS Lambda functions. And we've got, the ex-PM of Terraform Enterprise is our VP of product. So he wrote this himself, and he's put in a bunch of work into making the Terraform integration incredibly solid, working with the different kind of state storage options that Terraform state could be held on. And so now you can kind of see the big picture come together here. We've got serverless framework, support, traditional support, and SAM support now, CloudFormation support, while easy ability to fetch data over from Terraform. And so for companies out there who are using a lot of different things, this is just the constant challenge for them, is how do they use this stuff together? With V4, we've made such a big effort to try and integrate with all the things better than ever. And so you'll see that here, and hopefully this solves, especially for large companies who use a lot of stuff. You'll see the data fetching, referencing solutions really help you out.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really great that you have this sort of polyglot environment, platform teams using different kind of things, and that's no longer a blocker to build your serverless applications with a framework.
Yeah, I see one. I see one comment here saying, "Can I define Terraform artifacts and deploy via serverless framework?" So you can't deploy Terraform with serverless framework. So I don't know if we'll get into that. We're kind of just CloudFormation focused at the moment. And then Anton's given a shout out. He's a big Terraform, used Terraform for serverless on AWS. So got to give him the shout out for that. So a lot of people do deploy
Anton is
AWS
awesome.
Lambda.
He basically runs the serverless Terraform plugin. So yeah, Anton's absolutely awesome. If you want to know anything about serverless and Terraform, Anton is your go-to person. So yeah, appreciate it, Anton. Thanks for joining. And here, I suppose, a lot of the Terraform things you are building, you need to have the state anyway. So this is the Terraform has been deployed, and then you want to get the output from that. Doing the deployment would be a different kind of thing. yeah. But thanks for the Terraform questions, Sepp Patter. Apologies if I butchered your name. Yeah, thanks for joining us via Twitch. Appreciate it.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left, right, Julian? So I want to get into some of the AI stuff, perhaps, that we've been focused on. So we've shown off. Here's a bunch of cool things you could configuration patterns, with the serverless framework and ways to develop. But we recently launched a pretty cool boilerplate for folks, and it allows you to get an entire AI application fully deployed, fully serverless. I think it's all auto scaling and never pay per idle. And it's this project called the AWS AI stack here. So we launched this recently. I'm guilty of putting a pretty bloated animated GIF in here, which never seems to load. So I think I finally broke.
You broke GitHub.
GitHub's image serving backend there. Let me try and pull it up over here. Sorry,
I like Austen's particular. We need the animation, please.
Yeah, it's one of my kind of moonlighting hobbies here. I love to make the README graphics for our company, and so we've had so many great README graphics over the years and gotten a bunch of compliments on them. So, but they're huge, and sometimes GitHub has a hard time loading them. But I don't know, README is like the first thing your users see at the end of the day. So you got to make a good impression. So this is the AWS AI stack, and this is full stack boilerplate project for building serverless AI applications on AWS. So it's a great fit if you want that trusted AWS foundation, right, for AI apps, and you want to start using AWS Bedrock. So AI changing a lot, new models every single day. We at Serverless are increasingly bullish on the Bedrock strategy, though. We think it's kind of perfectly situated for this era when there's a lot of great open source AI models out there now, as well as some of the partnerships they've done with like Anthropic, for example. So developers love choice, right? And Bedrock gives you easy access to all these different models that are really good. And furthermore, Bedrock doesn't share the data, the inputs and outputs of these models with the model providers. So you have, better data privacy out of the box with choice on AWS, where a lot of your data and your other infrastructure probably already lives. And we were looking around trying to find like, hey, is there some out of the box solution that could just build a full stack app using Bedrock? That's a great example project, that is both great for referencing how to use all these technologies, and also just a great starting point that you can easily manipulate and deploy. So Maciej on our team, he's our VP of product. He went to Poland over the summer and worked on this for about a month, did a fantastic job. And this kind of brings home all the features we've been showing off here. So let me go into the AWS AI stack, and I'm going to get this deploying. It's a big one. So this one uses Compose, and it's filled with comments because this is meant to be a learning reference. So you could look at how we're doing everything. We put really good README in there and comments all throughout the YAML, so you know what does what. And you'll see here we've got a few services. So this is totally a full stack app. We've got a API. We've got a Lambda function that actually does streaming responses. So you get data to your user interface faster. Auth is built in as well. This is just on JSON Web Tokens. There's an event bus out of the box with Event Bridge. So typically you go into market with a full stack app. You want to handle request response flows, your API, and you want some type of infrastructure for async work. And Event Bridge has always been the missing piece of the serverless architecture. And Event Bridge is getting better and better. And so this comes out of the box. It'll deploy Event Bridge for you, as well as give you a template for a worker for handling events from Event Bridge. So now you can handle async work really easily. a user signs up, for example, you want to add them to the email list or send them a follow-up email or something like that. So pretty good domain-oriented architecture here, good separation of concerns. And there's a front end. So front end right now, this is just serving the front end via AWS Lambda. So it's nothing special. This is mostly a back-end learning experience, and the complexities in the back-end, we didn't want to get into front-end as much, and there's so many great options for front-end, but we do want to give you something out of the box. And so when you deploy this, you'll see here's a robust kind of composed deployment with all the outputs, shown here from each service. It's also running using Vite to build the front end. And we're almost done here. But yeah, you'll see all the references for parameters, data that needs to be passed in. I think you can see here our web service is receiving our backend URLs, out of the box pretty easily. So that web service is like the last thing that gets deployed. And then we are up and running. With our full stack app here. So you've got, again, auth is built in, so you've got a login and registration page. I'm going to go over, we have a hosted demo here. So the one trick with this is you have to get Bedrock enabled. And we love Bedrock, but I will say it's been hard to get accounts enabled for Bedrock. So on my demo account here, whatever, I've had it for years, but whatever the threshold is, I'm not meeting it for model access. So so one note, we've written some tips and our thoughts on how you get Bedrock access or who you have to slip a 20 to. I think typically you just have to write in, and if you can't get it out of the box, you can write in, and they've been pretty responsive. So, but this is our demo app. It's live. You can play with it right now. And this is exactly, what I just deployed here. And there you go. Pretty straightforward chat interface, just like ChatGPT. Write something in, and we're getting a response back. I think by default, we're using the new Llama model, the Llama, or I think it's the Llama one. We want to use the Claude 3.5, but I think that's only available in US East or US West still, potentially. So we'll switch that over. The beauty of this, though, is that it's really easy to use one or multiple models here in this architecture, too. You could use multiple models. Sometimes models are better for different use cases, right? Again, it's another benefit of having choice and leaning on something like Bedrock, which gives you that easy choice.
Yeah, I love the comment you made of, I'm not quite sure which model this one is using, because that is, I've been chatting to a big insurance company today. They're very early days of exploring Gen AI, and one of their first things is like, we have no idea what model we're going to use. Like, well, Bedrock is the super useful thing, because you can try them all, try any of them, swap them, move them around, and it's literally only the input payload to the model has some different parameters depending on the model. I mean, that's it's literally just some JSON. You need to throw the different models and you're done. So yeah, I love that the concept of just hosting many models, and you can choose between them and find the best one for your workload.
And there will be more models.
Yes,
we
every
know
week,
that for sure. Right?
Every week.
Yeah, the two of them launched since we started this stream. So it's good I think this is, and then plus the data privacy. Like, you're not sending all this data, to these different model providers out of the box. You get that better customer isolation. So there's a lot of possibilities here. And again, this is all serverless. Cool. So what is this costing right now? Nothing, unless I interact with it.
Austin, I've just been looking at the time. We've literally got seconds left. I can't believe I was getting so caught up in the interesting things. So, this has been amazing. I love the work. I love the focus on Serverless Framework V4. I love that you have a cool funding model, that there's investment going forward towards this. So, really appreciate your time. And, everybody, we're going to be back next week. We're going to be talking about Amplify Gen 2. So, if you want to build full stack apps for the CDK, Eric Hanchett, who is the guru on all things, will be there next week. But, Austin, thanks so much for your time. So glad we have finally had the Serverless Framework on. I'm sure we'll do it again when we can delve deep into some other kind of things. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julian.